Grace. So in his first interview of 2017, former federal prosecutor and Judiciary Committee member Congressman Trey Gowdy joins us. Congressman, good to have you with us tonight.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So you heard all of that, and you're very familiar with this case. What do you think about the Ninth Circuit Court's decision, and do you believe that President Trump was in the right when he said that people could not travel here from those several countries?
Well, Martha, anyone familiar with the Ninth Circuit is not surprised at their opinion. I think there's a really easy remedy that I think would build consensus across the entire country. You have to view people in different categories. They're U.S. citizens, which are entitled to the full panoply of constitutional rights and due process. And the other extreme, you have someone in Yemen who's never been to the United States, who just wants to visit Graceland. They're not entitled to any due process. They're not entitled to any constitutional protections. And then you have the group in the middle. So my counsel to the president, and I'm sure he's receiving this counsel because he's got access to much better lawyers than me, you have to have a different evidentiary basis depending on the category at bar. U.S. citizens is one category. If you have a visa and you have relied upon that visa to either rent an apartment or put your kids in school, then you do have certain property interests that you would want protected. Therefore, you're entitled to due process. So I think his executive order is pretty easily remedied, and you can remedy it without going to the U.S. Supreme Court.
So there's an indication that it was written by basically outside counsel and not run by the DOJ. And you just pointed to a number of holes in this initial executive order. What do you think about the fact that that's the way it was apparently done?
Well, I'm going to say this, Martha. There's a reason very few people ever raise their hand and volunteer to be the leader of the free world. It's a hard job. It's an important job. He's about a month into it. Tom Brady wasn't a very good quarterback his first year. Neither was Peyton Manning. I'm prepared to give this president time. He's never served in the House. He's never served in the Senate. It's up to, in my opinion, up to his advisors, including his legal advisors, to say, Mr. President, with different categories like non-immigrant visa holders versus U.S. citizens versus non-U.S. citizens, there's a different legal analysis, and it's incumbent upon his advisors to provide him with the evidentiary basis to withstand a court scrutiny.
So it sounds like you think they also need to fix the legal side of this, but they also need to communicate better what it's really about and what the president's powers are in terms of protecting the nation.
And that's the most troubling part of the Ninth Circuit opinion, quite frankly, to me. If your viewers, there's a case called Zavadas that the Ninth Circuit relied on. If your viewers were familiar with the facts of Zavadas, they would be outraged. That's the case that the Ninth Circuit relied upon. And the other part that's troubling is the commander-in-chief is elected, but judges are not. And you don't want federal judges overlooking battle plans or decisions to strike certain targets or decisions related to war or national security. It's not a blank check that the chief executive and commander-in-chief has, but you certainly don't have to clear everything with an Article III unelected federal judge.
What are your thoughts on Mike Flynn and the fact that he had to resign and discussions that he may have had with the Russian government about sanctions that we had against them? What's your take?
My take is that the commander-in-chief, the president, and the vice president have the right to rely on advisors that provide them the unadulterated, complete, whole truth. And it's unfair to the president and the vice president to give them anything other than that. I have never met General Flynn. People that I know that respect him, respect his service to the country, and I would join that. But you have to tell the truth to your boss all the time.
Understood. Are you surprised that this information, the transcript of this phone call, got out? That somehow, and now it's being perhaps pointed at former Obama officials who may have leaked this information. And I think about the fact that you wanted very much transcripts of conversations that had to go from the White House to the consulate in Benghazi, and you never got them.
Well, thank you for remembering that. My Democrat colleagues have amnesia. I will say this. They are very well rested because for 8 years they didn't lift a finger to do oversight. So all that energy you saw today at their press conference, that's because they went on an 8-year-long vacation from doing oversight over the executive branch. So I am all for the committees of jurisdiction looking into it. I'm also for looking into how classified information can make its way into the public domain. That is not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. It's a legal issue.
Trey Gowdy, thank you very much. Congressman, good to see you tonight.
Happy Valentine's Day.
You too. So just ahead, a New York Times reporter under fire for comments that he made about First Lady Melania Trump. We will explain what was missing, shall we say, from his apology.
Our goal is a clear and very safe community, great schools, and we want those jobs that are high-paying jobs.
Pleasure to be here on my first busy day in office.
People that are entrusted with national security secrets and classified information are leaking it out. That's a real concern for this president.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are in a fight for the soul of our democracy. The question is whether we will completely understand that this is our watch.
He's working on Obamacare. It's going to be very soon, right?
Yes.
On the national security team and kept doing the presidential briefings, being on the leader calls. We are aware of the Justice Department opinion, but the fact is that not until yesterday, General Flynn continued in his job, and it became increasingly unsustainable for him.
I understand that, but that's my question. The question is why. The White House counsel was told by Sally Yates at the Justice Department that the General Flynn was vulnerable to Russian blackmail. Did the White House counsel tell President Trump that?
I don't know the answer to that, and President Trump has asked me to join you today to say that he accepted the resignation of General Flynn, and really the key here in that resignation is very simple. It's that the Vice President, Mike Pence, was misled by General Flynn, or General Flynn could not completely recall what his conversations had been
But you
with
knew
the
that,
Russian ambassador.
but Kellyanne, the White House knew that almost 3 weeks ago. They knew that after the Justice Department told the White House counsel, Don McGahn, almost 3 weeks ago that General Flynn had not told the truth about those phone calls and was vulnerable to Russian blackmail.
Well, these are what are in printed reports, but the fact is that I can't reveal what the White House knew or didn't know and who in the White House knew or didn't know. All I can tell you is that General Flynn, as a national security advisor to the president, continued in that role, and the president also wants me to refer everyone to the comments of Charles Krauthammer last night on a different network, wherein he makes the point that it's not this contact or this incident necessarily, it's the misleading of the vice president or the incomplete information. It's either it's being dishonest or forgetful.
Well,
I'd like to say that General Flynn had a 30-plus year honorable career in the military. He's one of the chief intelligence officers, key intelligence officers of a generation. And we're sorry for this situation, but the president accepted his resignation. He's moving on.
But I understand what you're saying there, Kellyanne, but this is exactly the point. 3 weeks ago, the Justice Department told the White House that General Flynn was misleading the vice president, was misleading the public about his contacts with the Russians. You had that information. The White House had that information, chose to keep General Flynn in his job, chose not to correct the record, chose not to tell the public what they knew about General Flynn's phone calls. How could that be?
But George, again, I'm not here to say who knew what when, because first of all, that would be divulging information that is highly sensitive, and secondly, I don't know all the details. I haven't spoken to everyone that you're talking about in that instance. It's a very fluid situation. It was obviously very fluid into the night. We were here very late last night. The upshot of it is that General Flynn did have a conversation with Vice President Pence, apart from what you're saying in printed reports, and General Flynn assured Vice President Pence something that turned out to not be true. And that's really the key here. I think that General Flynn, in the end, decided he was a lightning rod. He did not want to be a distraction, and he tendered his resignation last night because what he had provided the vice president either was a product of misleading information or forgetfulness, and neither one was sustainable long term.
Kellyanne, I got to get to the bottom of this here. You asked to come on this morning at the president's request. The president wants you to come out and speak for the White House this morning. Do you know if the president was told 3 weeks ago, when Sally Yates told the White House counsel that General Flynn had been compromised, do you know if the president was told that?
I do not know that, George.
Do you know if the vice president was told that?
I do not know that.
Do you know why the White House chose not to correct the record for those 3 weeks?
Well, again, you're presuming that all the information you have there is completely factual and who knew what when. And this is very fluid. I mean, the bottom line is that as time wore on, as everybody continued in their roles, it became increasingly apparent, particularly over the weekend when General Flynn clarified his own earlier statement, George, a statement that he had provided to the vice president and that other members of the administration, frankly, went out and publicly repeated, which is that he had not discussed a certain topic in his conversations with the Russian ambassador. And so when General Flynn clarified those comments that it's possible and he could not recall, that accelerated matters in a way that was different. And that's where we are today.
It is a fact that the Justice Department did tell the White House counsel, Don McGahn, information almost 3 weeks ago. Final question. You said late yesterday afternoon that the President had full confidence in General Flynn. How could that be true?
Now, the President's very loyal. It just became unsustainable, and the President late last night accepted the resignation of General Flynn. Today he's moving on. It just became clear that we'll need to have acting National Security Advisor General Keith Kellogg in the role. He's been working very closely with the President for a number of months. And then, of course, we've been talking about former Navy SEAL and Vice Admiral Harward and David Petraeus as well, General Petraeus, as possible permanent